Welcome everyone to this really special event for SLN, where we would like to celebrate our 20 years as a network for snow leopards. So I'm Justine Shanti Alexander. I'm the current ED for SLN, and I'll be acting as the facilitator for today's anniversary session. But before starting, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the floods that are happening in Pakistan. And I just hope that everyone here whose family or who knows anyone who's there are safe, and that, you know, if we can do anything for them to get in touch. But we're just acknowledging that that's taking place as we're also having this event. So anniversaries are an opportunity to look back at achievements over the years. And we're going to do that today with our panel, but we're also going to draw on their reflections about how snow leopard conservation and research have evolved over the last 20 years. And of course, snow leopard research and conservation goes beyond 20 years of the network. But in the last 20 years, which I think has gone by really, really fast, arguably represents a huge progress in the work for snow leopards that is still really relevant today. So we brought together 5 individuals who've played a role in SLN at different points in time, a long history. And we're lucky to have Tom McCarthy, Yashvir, Ali Nawaz, Sibylla Norris, and Lingyun Xiao joining us from different parts of the world. Unfortunately, Sibylla could not join us at the last minute due to a family emergency, but we have Kustub Sharma, who's joined us last minute just to present her presentations that she had prepared. So they're not the only ones who've obviously contributed to SLN. However, they represent key voices in SLN and provide insights and help us go back and capture a particular period of the network's existence. So each panel will present his or her snapshot of this timeline for a brief, we hope, a brief 8 minutes, but they might go a little bit over time, and that's totally fine. And then after the presentations, we will go into an open discussion with everyone here. So during the talks, do feel free to write in the chat. We'll make an effort to come back to them in the final part of today's event, and also want to hear from your thoughts and your involvement of the network. So today's event will start with a presentation by Tom McCarthy on the why and the how of the network back in 2002. Unfortunately, Tom could not join us due to travel commitments, but he took the time to dig out a number of early documents and share a recording of what SLN meant to him at the time in the early days and as one of SLN's founders. So we'll start off with him and then go through the timeline together. So I'm just going to share my screen.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on the planet. I apologize I could not be here live today, but it's a pleasure to be here virtually with you to celebrate 20 years of the Snow Leopard Network. When the organizers asked me to speak about the early years of the SLN, specifically 2000 to 2004, and to touch on the subjects of not just how, but why the Snow Leopard Network came into being, I thought it would be relatively easy since, well, I've been involved since the beginning. But I quickly realized that to really discuss the questions of how and why, I would need to start a little sooner. So let's go back a bit further and start in 1970. Until that year, very little was known about snow leopards in the wild, with most of our knowledge coming from cats in zoos. But in 1970, this photograph of a snow leopard taken by George Schaller in Chittorgarh, Pakistan, was the first widely published image of the cat in its natural habitat. George had essentially given snow leopards to the world, and there was no going back. A few years later, Helen Frink, a volunteer at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, met her first snow leopards, and it was the beginning of a lifelong love affair with the charismatic cat, and another key event on the path to the Snow Leopard Network. Later that decade, half a world away at the Helsinki, Finland Zoo, Leif Blomqvist initiated a series of international snow leopard symposiums that would continue essentially every 3 years until the final one in Pakistan in 1995. Over the years, the subject matter of the symposium shifted from mainly zoo-focused animal husbandry to the ecology and conservation of the species in the wild. And of course, no timeline would be complete without noting the groundbreaking study by Rodney Jackson in Nepal, which really set the stage for building our sound knowledge base on snow leopards in the wild. And it was that same year, 1981, that Helen Freeman took her love of snow leopards to a new level and created the International Snow Leopard Trust. Rodney Jackson would later join Helen at the trust to help build the organization into the preeminent conservation organization it remains today. In 2000, I joined the Snow Leopard Trust, stepping into Rodney's former role, which was a daunting challenge, I assure you. And under Helen's leadership, and with enormous support from the Trust Director, Brad Rutherford, we decided it was time to move beyond the triennial symposium series and instead do what was needed to provide a definitive roadmap for ensuring the long-term survival of the species. It was then that the process of creating the Snow Leopard strategy began. Over the next year, we built a team of more than 60 experts spanning the globe and including members from each range country, including representatives from conservation NGOs, governments, academies of science, universities, and zoos. This highly participatory process aimed to gather information on threats to snow leopards, appropriate actions to address those threats, knowledge gaps, protected area status, policy and law issues, and any perceived roadblocks to achieving conservation of the species. The structure of the survival strategy slowly began to take form, with the discussion among experts being facilitated via email and a member website where possible, or good old-fashioned postal mail where it was not. Our goal was to come together in Seattle in November 2001 to finalize the strategy at a Snow Leopard Summit. But of course, the events of 9/11 set those plans back. However, we persevered and finally were able to convene in May of 2002. As the 7-day summit drew to a close, there was a real reluctance by all of us who had worked together for nearly a year and a half to simply walk away and hope the Snow Leopard survival strategy would actually be implemented. Too much work had been put into it, and we had grown quite close during the process. So in the closing days, the attendees created a rough outline for how we would continue to work together, and we called it the Snow Leopard Network. But what exactly was the network? How would it function? Well, the basic concepts had been laid out at the summit, but it was left to a steering committee to figure out the details. The steering committee consisted of 7 individuals elected by network members and an executive director from the Snow Leopard Trust. We first met in November 2002 in Beijing, China. Well, unfortunately, no one seems to have taken a picture of that meeting, so I'm substituting this one from our second meeting in Pakistan. It was at that first meeting that the goals of the network were defined. The bylaws for how the network would function were also drafted, and both elements were further refined at subsequent steering committee meetings in Pakistan and Tashkent. Committees were created that would deal with such issues as communications, policy and position statements, education, research, and national action plans. One of the first and very critical tasks of the Communication Committee was to create Snow Leopard Network bibliography, and then to populate that with as much published literature on the snow leopard as possible, including, very importantly, publications in the languages of range states. Another early need identified by the steering committee was a small grants program to help facilitate the many research and conservation actions identified in the strategy document. The grant program was implemented just 1 year after the SLN came into being and distributed over $30,000 to 7 projects in the first year alone. To date, it has provided nearly $400,000 to 70 projects. So as I hope you can see, many key events over nearly 30 years slowly led to the establishment of the Snow Leopard Network. But once the network was established, it wasted no time in doing everything required to ensure the long-term survival of snow leopards. And with that, I would like to hand it off to my dear friend and colleague, Yash Veer, to tell you about the next phase of the network.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad he stuck to the exact 8 minutes, which is maybe easy to do because it was recorded. But we're really sad he couldn't be here with us today. But we do have Yashvir, who was on that first steering committee. So over to you, Yashvir, for the next period.
Thank you so much, Justine. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad that such an event has been organized by the current SLN. So many thanks. So this is dhaba, kind of a small restaurant in a place called Rumse in Ladakh. And this is something that I remember as one of the initial places where, sitting with Rodney and later on with Tom, we had discussed a lot about what needs to be done about snow leopard conservation in India and also globally, to basically understand how threats and what we know about snow leopard actually differed so much across the range. And even the people, the international experts that had worked across different countries still had fairly limited idea about the issues that the species faces. And this is, I think, where the idea of the SLSS had kind of begun, in processes like this before 2000. And this is something which really led to something which I think is a very large network now. Next. Yeah. Okay, so this period that has been allocated to me. I have basically, I'm going to focus on these three aspects, which are very important in their own ways. And interestingly, much of these actually happened slightly later in this period, but in the Beijing conference that we had, which I'll speak about in the next slide. But this is the whole idea of the range-wide snow leopard planning is something which was fairly after 6-7 years of the Snow Leopard Network's existence. We had a body of expertise. We had close to 300 experts already. There was exchange of emails, information that had begun to happen. And as Tom explained, we had literature coming in from non-English speaking countries also. And so this is the time when after paying due tributes to Helen Freeman, who had just passed in 2008, the conference basically looked at defining a vision where a world where snow leopards and their prey thrive in healthy mountain ecosystems across all major ecological settings of their entire range, and where snow leopards are revered as unique ecological, economic, aesthetic, and spiritual assets. So there was a clear definition of ecosystem and working with people. And the three things that this conference actually highlighted was that each country should really work on an action plan, have a nodal person, ideally from the government, who can push for the work through the process of making the action plans function, and also work towards transboundary cooperation. Like all of us know, this is clearly something that was recognized early on as being very, very crucial for the species, which is spread essentially along international borders, some of which unfortunately are also disputed. Next. Yeah. So the first thing that I will speak about is the action plans. And so this is a stage where we still didn't know much about the species. Some studies in smaller valleys had come up. We had some really nice programs on conservation, but essentially in small valleys or a cluster of villages. But already there was an understanding that snow leopard as a species is spread across the entire landscape, across vast areas, not limited to the protected areas alone. And there has to be a much better approach to conservation, approach which cannot be limited only to wildlife protected areas. People are marginal, and one needs to work with a much better planning, where these small experiments of model conservation and research can be upscaled. And this at that stage was, it was believed that if each country could make a strategy and action plan, which kind of sets a vision, goals, objectives, activities, and a work plan for who would do what in the typical classical work plan, strategy, and action plan fashion. That would enable different stakeholders to start working, cooperating, and having much better impact. And at the end of this meeting, at least 7 countries had already prepared templates for maybe going back and working on these action plans. And some of these had been already started, like Nepal had already started working on it. But the action planning process, and David is here, all of us really helped with getting these action plans in place for work to happen. Next. Yeah, so other big thing that happened in this meeting and something during this period was this whole mapping exercise. Till around this time, we had different rule-based models, either elevation-based or, Rodney had made an attempt to make an expert-based map of the area. But, I think in around 2000, it was realized that we should really try to harness the knowledge of experts globally to make these maps, which are much more meaningful. And in those days, Tom had sent packets based on expertise, physical maps with markers for us to mark out areas, all our records of our sightings or information, and then start planning, putting up areas around that we were, which we knew about. And so basically the potential range, the area that we actually had knowledge was basically worked out. We worked on actual physical maps, and it was a fascinating exercise. About 22 experts across 11 countries actually participated in finally in Beijing. And for me personally, it is very interesting. But the one sad part was that because of this exercise, which was spread across hours, I missed going to the Great Wall of China. Next. Next. Yeah. So here we have the map outputs, which is like the potential range, about 3.3 million square kilometers. Yes. Next. These are the 9 biomes, so to say, the ecological divisions from the Himalaya, Tibetan Plateau, Karakoram, Hindu Kush, etc., that were defined. Next. To an area of about like the whole 3.3 million potential distribution, and within this, we had the possible distribution, the probable distribution, and the definitive distribution. So this definitive distribution you can see is about 27% of the entire area. And then we have the possible and the potential range. Next. So within this, the Snow Leopard conservation units, where actually the green areas that you see are the Snow Leopard conservation units that were worked out. And these are, from as small as 400 to as large as about 200,000 square kilometers. So these are essentially areas where experts believed snow leopards were in a much better position compared to many other areas. So this is an exercise which went on paper before the conference and during the conference. and these outputs were finally completed. These 69 snow leopard conservation units were defined at this stage. So, one might see that, all of us may have seen these maps subsequently. We have been probably using it also. But this is based on inputs from these 22 experts plus more during the conference to really put these things together and get sort of a habitat quality tag to these maps. Next. Now, this is something which had already started happening because there was interest in snow leopard that had begun by this time in many areas. And so there are sometimes some slightly controversial ideas, like including trophy hunting of snow leopards had come up, reintroductions or introductions of snow leopard had come up. And there was this whole doubt that people would have about how to rescue. What happens when you discover a cub, for example, or an injured snow leopard? So we basically had the policy group that Tom spoke about, get together, pick up experts from across the network to develop position papers. So one during this period was on the idea of reintroduction that Kyrgyzstan was contemplating, and the network basically advised them strongly to go only according to IUCN guidelines and not really try anything else. Similarly, there was this snow leopard cub that was rescued in 2005 under slightly suspicious circumstances. There was a lot of debate in Pakistan about what should be done about this. And ultimately, it was sent out to the Bronx Zoo, where it is probably still alive. His name is Leo and has been a very successful part of their breeding program. But it was something which really, where the State Department was involved. Various prime ministers and leaders from Pakistan have gone and seen this snow leopard in this area. So it has been something which the Snow Leopard Network did advise on what ideally should be done to rehabilitate this cub. Essentially, actually, not to try and introduce this really little cub back into the environment, or to keep it in a zoo just for display. So positives did happen. Next. Yeah. So finally, this was not exactly a part of the Snow Leopard Network, but a lot of scientists from the Snow Leopard Network were involved in this, path-breaking research project, which has started around 2008 and probably should continue beyond 2023. And it has actually transformed, and it has really added information about snow leopard on so many different aspects, not just home ranges, regarding which some really brilliant new facets have been known, but also about snow leopard demography, relationships, denning behavior, behavior in general. And this, I think, I just wanted to mention that, this is something which a lot of people within the Snow Leopard Network have been involved with, and actually started in 2008 within this period. So with this, I'll basically end and hand it back to Justine, giving a general idea of some of the key highlights of this period. Justine, thank you.
Thanks, Yashvir. It's fascinating to see how many of the events you shared are still relevant today, like the long-term study, but also the Beijing meeting. And I suspect that our next speaker was at that Beijing meeting, Ali Nawaz. So I'm just going to pass it straight away to our next speaker. Ali, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Justine. So in this period, I believe two striking development which went in parallel has been revision of the Snow Leopard Survival Strategy that I would like to start with. And second was the birth of the GSLAP and national snow leopard programs in 12 snow leopard countries. This, as Tom has described the process of Snow Leopard strategy in detail, and he has elaborated how it turned different important developments in the snow leopard conservation scenario. Similarly, I also believe I have a personal link to this important document. I read this document in 2007 when I was finishing my PhD, and this is how I got fascinated about snow leopard and its conservation initiatives, and I got linked to, this important initiative. So this document, what it was about, it has, put things in a beautiful framework where you put a synthesis of the snow leopard status and its conservation scenario across a range of 12 countries. You bring together the threats, and from threats, you identify research needs as well as the conservation actions. So it was really a well thought through document and guided important conservation actions in different countries. But at the time pause, there has been new developments in different countries. Climate starts changing, and overall habitat starts changing. So there was a need for revision. This revision happened in 2014, and one important, I believe, the part of this revision was inclusion of this new, distribution map of snow leopard, which is coming from the Beijing conference that Yashvir has just, described in detail. So that was an update, and it is developed from inputs of so many experts from different countries. So at the moment, this is, something which is best available. So at the same time, the strategy, look into the threats which emerged in recent years. So they discussed in detail the, issue of the mining, greater infrastructure development in snow leopard habitats, and climate change. And based on these threats and some other parallel approaches that, the biodiversity community has been exercising across the world, this snow leopard strategy has proposed new conservation approaches. One important, it talks about the evaluation of ecosystem services. It sets a framework how to do it, how to use it for the snow leopard conservation. It talks bit in greater detail about the transboundary conservation and transboundary actions, and brought into consideration trophy hunting as a conservation tool. And and based on the accumulated knowledge in last 10 years, this strategy updates the existing knowledge on snow leopard status and its ecology, and based on that, it has identified the new gaps which are relevant today to focus research on. So this is, I believe, one important document that has been developed in this era, and that is still very useful regarding so many action in different countries. Next slide, please. So next important element that changed overall snow leopard conservation arena in different countries is GSLAP, Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program. That is essentially an alliance between the 12 range countries and in partnership with leading conservation organizations and communities, scientists, and so many other people, which came together on a common goal of saving the snow leopards and the mountain ecosystem. This, I think, development started in 2012. Some people in the World Bank and Global Tiger Initiative, they got interested in, I believe, the snow leopard conservation as well. And they got along with the Snow Leopard Trust and the people who were working with the snow leopard conservation. And this idea was that floated to different countries. And there has been then preparatory meetings, couple of them, one took place, the initial one in the Bishkek, and then there was another one in Bangkok, one in Moscow. And finally, these 12 countries agreed upon agenda of snow leopard, global snow leopard conservation in 2013. And that was, endorsed by the high-level government bodies, and it was also attended by the leading, donors of the world. And for that reason, snow leopard got into greater attention at not only the political level, at the conservation level, but also as well as the agencies who actually fund the conservation work across the world. And that then lead to the several follow-up actions, which led to the establishment of steering committee, which has a representation of ministerial level from the 12 range countries, establishment of the secretariat, which is in Bishkek, and then there has been a couple of follow-up steering committee meetings, which focused on specific, conservation needs of the snow leopards. Next slide, please. So one important, I believe the linkage between the SLN, or Snow Leopard Survival Strategy, and Global Snow Leopard Ecosystem Program are the National Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program. So if you realize in the Snow Leopard Survival Strategy, there was a promise that each partnering community will develop their national action plans for snow leopard. And many countries, they started developing it, they were in the raw form, but with the initiative of GSLAP, the governments and the conservation communities, they got more push, and they developed more comprehensive action plan, and the framework was decided by the GSLAP. And I believe GSLAP also got wisdom from the Snow Leopard Survival Strategies. So in that way, all the national action plans from the 12 countries, they followed the same strategy, and they were synced together. And GSLAP is essentially a summary or synthesis of 12 snow leopard range country action plans, which got the form of Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program, this document. Under this program, one important target has been identifying and protecting 20 important snow leopard landscapes across the 12 countries. And those were identified based on research as well as through proper consultation with the communities, with the the provincial governments as well as with the federal governments. And that way, these on the map you see, these are important different landscapes which are under focus in the current years. Next slide. So one important, I believe, achievement of this global snow leopard program movement has been the resource mobilization. Since many important donors, I mentioned, they have been motivated, they have been part of the process. They realized importance of the snow leopard and ecosystem. So this process then ended up in funding 7 important projects in different range countries. For example, Afghanistan, India, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, with a total worth of $55 million. So that was a huge, amount of money to do something tangible for snow leopard conservation. I remember when we were in a first meeting of the GSLAP, each country was supposed to bring up, a kind of a concept note for snow leopard conservation with tentative amount of what they need. And we used to work with the money of like $20,000 and $50,000 or $15,000, something like that. And we went through a thought how much is the good amount of money to ask for snow leopard conservation, and realizing that maybe people may not be motivated to give a lot of money if we ask unrealistically. So what we found was majority of the countries, they were asking about something like 100,000 to 300,000 or something like that. And then there has been a discussion that if we want to address this issue effectively, we need to look at, at a larger scale. Otherwise, we may not maybe focusing on limited valleys and limited issues, and that may not end up, um, providing an effective solution for the snow leopard conservation. So this huge amount of money, was unusual, and you see in this picture below, this is inception workshop of the JEF-funded snow leopard conservation project in Pakistan, which was started in 2018, and we had a money of about $5 million, which was supposed to be spent on snow leopard research, addressing snow leopard and human conflicts, and education, and providing alternative economic means of community, so that they're dependent on the natural ecosystems and the habitat could be minimized. And utilizing this program, on the map you see on the top, it has helped snow leopard conservation work to the 40 important valleys of snow leopard habitat that cover, I think, almost 50 to 60% of the important habitat area of snow leopard in Pakistan. So this project in that way has been very effective for scaling up the tested approaches of snow leopard conservation and addressing the conflict issues and loss. Next document, please. So apart from what was happening in the country, there has been important developments in the region as well. For example, Jeff also funded one transboundary cooperation project for snow leopard conservation, which was handled by the GSLAB, and it supported, of course, the GSLAB, this secretariat activities, but also ended up guiding the country programs on the basis of several important, policy documents, and which are, very important and available on the GSLAB sites. One of that, my favorite, is the tourist guidelines for the snow leopard habitat, and we took benefit of it, and we bit expanded on that document with the help of the GSLAB secretariat, and launched one important pilot site of conservation tourism in Pakistan, which has been appreciated by the federal government, and this is gold medal for many other organizations who want to utilize natural resources in a constructive way. Similarly, there is important policy document on conservation education, and there's a policy document on managing snow leopard encounters and valuing in economic the snow leopard ecosystem as well. And similarly, there has been another parallel project initially basically managed by WWF, that was the High Asia project. Together with the GSLAB, they developed an important toolkit for the management planning. I mentioned in previous slide that GSLAB promised to protect 20 important landscapes of the snow leopards. And in order to have a common strategy and common frameworks, you need to have a common strategy. So for that reason, this toolkit was very relevant. We did management planning of 2 of our landscapes in Pakistan, and we have been the beneficiary of these documents, which provided strategic these guidelines, how to do for example, the zoning, how to do the governance, how to do the community engagement, and so many different areas. And that I believe it help us enhance the quality of overall document, and it is at the same time aligned to the planning approach that other countries are following. And the final thing that I would like to talk about is the one outcome of this GSLAB is this pause PAS is the population assessment of wild snow leopards. And why this is important, of course, everybody appreciate without a good knowledge on the species numbers, your conservation planning may be compromised. But apart from that, one dilemma we face, particularly in Pakistan, was when we talk about population, people have different approach in understanding this word. Everybody thinks if you have seen a big habitat, it means maybe 500 snow leopards. Or if you have, villagers have seen 50 snow leopards, you assume there are maybe 200 snow leopards in the valley. So how to define a population, how to plan a population survey, and how to assess a population, this is something there was no clear understanding in the conservation community, in the academia, and in the researchers as well. Everybody, they got the cameras. There was no, consensus how many cameras are enough to guess the snow leopard habitat. Some were just putting 2 and assessing the population. Some were putting 200. And what is the spacing between them? And how you conclude your results and so many things. So this PAS initiative, I think that is highly significant from various perspectives. One is it brought together all the people, whether they were conservationists, researchers, people from academia, or the government who were interested in snow leopard population assessment together, so that we could discuss about the common framework and we adopt a similar strategy to assess this. Secondly, cooperating with the leading experts of population ecology, they have developed important toolkits that guide you how to plan the surveys, then how to conduct the surveys. And when the surveys are done, they also help, these toolkits help in analyzing the data and, getting some ecologically important numbers. And during this whole process, the people in the secretariat, they have been very kind enough to interact with the people in different countries and help guide them in implementing this process without any interest. Of course, the interest is snow leopard conservation, but beyond that, there were no specific interest for them. So I think this is all that I wanted to say today.
Thank you, Ali. I mean, it's fascinating to see that next year will be GSLEP's 10-year anniversary already. So a lot has happened in those 10 years. So thanks for trying to summarizing that so well in last presentation. So our next speaker was Sibylla Norris. She's been on the steering committee for 2 terms, but unfortunately she had a very last minute emergency with her family, but we have Dr. Kushtu Sharma, who's come in at the last minute to present her slides and what she had prepared. He's also been part of GSLEP, so in the discussion period, we can also ask him more questions about GSLEP as well. Go ahead.
All right. Hi, and thank you. It's truly an honor for me to find myself in this list of stellar speakers, experts talking about the Snow Leopard Network. I mean, be it Tom, Yashvir, Ali. But to be honest, just to make it clear, this presentation is based on the content prepared by Sibyl, who can unfortunately not join us today due to her father's health. So on behalf of the entire Snow Leopard community, I'd like to wish her father the best of health. And take on the role of a delivery boy, presenting to you what milestones define the roles and activities of the Snow Leopard Network between 2015 and 2018. To begin with, 2015 was also the year of the Snow Leopard. It was declared as the year of Snow Leopard. It really drove a lot of attention and built a lot of awareness for the Snow Leopard. And one of the main reasons why it happened so was the year also was when the first ever steering committee meeting of the Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection Program was held, where the steering committee's regulations and bylaws were set, as Ali also mentioned. This is where the Snow Leopard Network participated for the first time in the steering committee meeting. Next one. The Snow Leopard Survival Strategy was also completed, reviewed, and launched in this year. This was an update of the previous Snow Leopard survival strategies to assess and reprioritize threats, if I may say so, and define approaches for conservation, education, and political strategies. The Snow Leopard conservation grants have remained a major source of support to the community of researchers and conservationists out there. And in 2015, 4 grants were given away to scientists and conservationists from 3 countries: Nepal, Pakistan, and Bhutan. And since it was the year of the snow leopard, there was a massive growth in public awareness, which also led to some sort of a growth in snow leopard tourism, community conservation, herder and community involvement, homestays, crafts, school engagements, and so on. So this public awareness of snow leopards interestingly grew around this period of time, which also led to supposed ecotourism demand around that time. And this is when the famous Snow Leopard Biodiversity book was published. What's remarkable is that the book had 400 Snow Leopard Network members as co-authors. And if I'm not mistaken, the book's already in its second round of review, and now I think soon the book's new version will be coming out. This was also the year, well, you see a lot was happening in 2015, but this was also the year when the Snow Leopard Network lobbied in a very focused way to curtail mining expansions from destroying snow leopard habitats in various countries, including the Kyrgyz Republic. And the Snow Leopard bibliography, which has remained one of the major attractants for a lot of researchers and conservationists from across the world, was tipping at around 1,400 plus articles at this point in time. Moving on to 2016, this is the year when the BBC Planet Earth 2 series had a mountain episode which featured the snow leopard and garnered a Herculean number of 10 million viewers for the episode. The Snow Leopard Network grants, the Snow Leopard Conservation grants continued. This year, 5 grantees received the grant, including Nepal, Mongolia, Pakistan, and India, researchers from these countries. Now let's quickly move to 2017. Now, this was an interesting year because there were 2 very intriguing events that took place. One was that this is the year when IUCN changes the snow leopard status from endangered to vulnerable. This change in status followed through a rigorous amount of discussions and a lot of controversy as well within the within the Snow Leopard Network membership. It also was the year when the Snow Leopard Network participated in the International Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Conservation Forum in Bishkek. This was the year when the Bishkek Declaration 2017, as a follow-up to the Bishkek Declaration 2013, was endorsed at the highest level from all the governments of the Snow Leopard range countries. This high-level forum allowed strengthening range countries' commitments and activities to protect snow leopards, but it also was remarkable in bringing together some leading businesses and business leaders from different sectors of the industry in the same room as conservationists to discuss innovative ideas for developing revenue for conservation and engaging business and industry in conservation. And what it also did, because of the interest in snow leopard numbers inspired by the change in the status, and also as it was recognized as to be one of the key lacunae in understanding. As Ali has just mentioned, this is when the Snow Leopard Network collaborated with the GSLEP and various other organizations and experts in building the efforts to estimate global snow leopard population under the initiative called PAWS, which is actually an acronym which stands for the Population Assessment of World's Snow Leopards. So GSLEP and other partners continue to develop and expand the PAWS action plan in this year, which in simple words is designed to develop and implement a statistically replicable protocol, not just statistically replicable, but also pragmatic and practically possible implementable protocol to assess range-wide snow leopard distribution and abundance. It was spectacular to have received the support of various scientists and conservationists and statisticians to help take the effort forward. Quickly moving on to 2018. 2018 is when it's almost like the Snow Leopard Network goes public, as if it's an IPO. But this is the year when Snow Leopard Network starts engaging in social media to communicate within the network as well as with external stakeholders. I think it started with a humble Twitter following of about 600 something, and currently it stands at several thousand. So also this is the year when many snow leopard researchers and conservation organizations and individuals begin communicating via various social media platforms, be it WhatsApp, Twitter, WeChat, YouTube, and so on. It's the year when suddenly Snow Leopard Network is visible much beyond the network that we are looking at. Now, by the way, just before I end, I'd like to mention here, I'll come back to the bibliography. In these 3 years, the bibliography added more than 100 articles to the list of articles here, and it stood at more than 1,500 references. So that's a very brief and a quick summary of what happened between 2015 and 2018. It was a continuation and expansion of a strong community of practice, and this is when it was the period of strengthening creative collaboration and knowledge sharing within the community of members of conservationists and researchers, and going beyond. So yeah, with that, I'd like to pass it on to the next speaker, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kustub, for coming in, and also at such short notice for presenting Sibylla's presentation. So over to our last speaker, and then we'll go into a discussion. We are a little bit behind schedule, but I hope everyone will stay with us just for 20 minutes after the next speaker for the discussion period, which I hope will be also very rich. So over to our last time period by Lingyun Xiao, who is on our current SLN steering committee. So over to you, Lingyun.
Okay, thank you, Justine. Hello, everyone. So this is Lingyun Xiao, and I served as one member of the current steering committee of Snow Leopard Network. I was honored today to be assigned the task to introduce the most recent work and achievement of SLN. As already mentioned by Kustub, in the year 2017, Snow Leopard has been downgraded in IUCN Red List from endangered to vulnerable. In the same year, I believe lots of us here have attended the International Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Conservation Forum hosted by the President of Kyrgyzstan in Bishkek. And there is a lot of discussions and also even debate about the conservation status change of snow leopard. But most importantly, all snow leopard range countries reached to an agreement that we need a more balanced survey of the world's snow leopard population to have a more rigorous population assessment. So, sorry, next slide. So this ambitious plan was named as PULSE, and the GSLAP Secretariat has been tasked with coordinating this initiative. But during these years, SLN has also been partnered with GSLAP on a number of projects with a focus on supporting the PULSE. Next slide, please. So PULSE aims to bring together the global snow leopard conservation community's resources, manpower, and expertise to jointly arrive at a scientifically robust estimate of snow leopard distribution and abundance within the next 5 years. This is already the 5th year, and hopefully a preliminary result will be released soon. It also aims to establish best practices and standard protocols for data collection and management. At the same time, facilitate capacity building in snow leopard conservation communities. So far, the PULSE initiative has received support from the, next slide. Next one. Yes, support from the 12 snow leopard range countries. In all countries, effort has been made by the governments in collaboration with NGOs, institutions, and individuals to align their ongoing research and monitoring priorities with the larger goal of estimating provincial level, national level, regional level, or even global snow leopard abundance. Each country have updated its snow leopard distribution map following occupancy approaches or other agreed means to define the potential snow leopard distribution range that underpins the PULSE estimates. As an example, here, Mongolia is one of the first countries to have estimated nationwide snow leopard distribution using an occupancy framework covering nearly 500,000 square kilometers. The team then used a balanced sampling approach to ensure that all the survey sites were representationally distributed, and using this data, a preliminary analysis has revealed an abundance of 953 snow leopard, which was also published last year. Next, please. Next. Yes, thank you. Other countries are making similar progress, like here shown on the slide. In India, population estimation for one province has been completed and published, resulting in an estimate of 51 snow leopard over 26,000 square kilometers of potential snow leopard habitat. So far, surveys in Mongolia, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, and Bhutan have covered the entire breadth of the potential covariance that can affect snow leopard density. In other countries, areas with lower snow leopard densities are still a little bit underrepresented. Next, please. So until now, over 159 PULSE compliance surveys have been conducted to date, and collectively more than 6,300 camera trap stations have been used to generate data on snow leopard abundances, covering an area of approximately 190,000 square kilometers. That's nearly 10% of the estimated snow leopard range has been surveyed so far. And that represents an increase of 400% from when PULSE was initiated, and up to, among which up to 35% of the sites sampled are from outside protected areas. The survey efforts to date represent one of the most ambitious scientific efforts to estimate a wildlife population using a decentralized yet unified approach evolving in multiple governments, organizations, and individuals. Next, please. Yes, to be highlighted, all these progresses have been made under the background of the COVID pandemic. So we still remember all those lockdown periods and policies in different regions of the world, and which has deeply affected the progress of our work, especially in cities. However, the local communities have always been the keystone of our field activities, and it's them who guaranteed the continuity of snow leopard survey and conservation. Next, please. During the pandemic, SLN has also been exploring different ways to re-energize exchange amongst members and organizations across the world through online activities. So we really need to take this opportunity to thank the effort made by these two excellent young ladies here today, Justin and Raki, who brought SLN into a new era of virtual interactions. Next. So here are some just summarized statistics of SLN until the most recent day. During the recent 2 years, in total, 17 online training modules supported by a lot of our partner organizations and many facilitators have been organized and delivered to SLN members, and in total involved 528 participants. At the meantime, 26 online webinars have been held where we exchange a range of country updates, topic updates such as polls, and the latest snow leopard related research findings. In total, we have 479 participants across all webinars. To be mentioned, most training sessions and webinars have been recorded. Next slide, please. Yes, have been recorded, and if interested, you could find them on the SLN website and also on the YouTube channel, just like mentioned by Kustuk just now. So we could skip those 3 slides. It's just a screenshot of, yes, of the recordings. Yes, so this is the YouTube channel. Also, in the year 2020, SLN moved the website to a new WordPress platform. You can find it is this now the website is quite resourceful. You can find many useful tools and resources on the website on the different menus, which is the most convenient way for you to find different, no matter it's news or tools related or research updates related to snow leopard. But you could also follow us on different social media platforms. Next, please. Such as Twitter. Yes, such as Twitter and YouTube. And next slide, please. As repeatedly mentioned by different presenters just now, we have renewed the bibliography, which is like a go-to place for all of us who are doing conservation and research about snow leopard. So the bibliography has just been updated last week. Now it includes a simple homepage with advanced searching engine to facilitate in locating articles. And until now, it have over 1,500 publications dating all the way back to the early 1990s. We have also moved our members' mailing list to a new Google group. During this move, we migrated the whole membership after requesting members to confirm their continuing interest in being part of SLN. So the current listed membership, which consists of 577 SLN members, are therefore all active members. So next slide, please. Last but not the least, I would like to mention this new journal. In the joint effort of the current steering committee, SLN has launched a new academic journal, Snow Leopard Reports. As you can see here, it already has its own website based on the platform provided by a Swedish library. And many thanks to Oriane, who takes effort to realize it. And we have already received several manuscripts such as submissions and completed the peer review process. A huge welcome to contribute to our new journal if you have anything worth to share within the Snow Leopard community. Thanks a lot. That's my talk today.
Thank you, Ling Yun, and thank you to all our presenters. I think you all highlighted, I thought I knew SLN pretty well, but you all highlighted something new, but also something really relevant still in our time today. So can all of the presenters please turn on your camera, because we'll move into a quick discussion period, because I'm sure that our participants are dying to ask some questions or would like to to explore SLN even more in the history of SLN. So please write in your questions in the chat. But before we go into the questions, I did want us to kick us off with just one question for all of you. And we talked specifically about SLN over these presentations, but I wanted to ask what you guys thought were also other key events for snow leopard research or conservation itself outside policy like GSLEP that have been also key for snow leopards over these last 20 years. Are there any other wider events that you have felt have also played a major role? So maybe over to you, Yashvir, first, because, and also Yashvir, maybe you can tell us, you've been with us with SLN since the beginning. So any thoughts on that process over the last 20 years?
Thank you, Justine. So, yes, I've been there for a fairly long time and 2.5 steering committees. So personally speaking, being a part of this kind of decision-making part of SLN was very rewarding. Working with stalwarts early on until about 2015 or something, it was very rewarding at a personal level. But I think, to answer your question, there are many, many things which have really happened in the last 20 years. See, the number of, if you see Rishi Sharma's recent report, the kind of progress in research that has happened in the last 1.5 decades is phenomenal. I think that is a very, very satisfying thing. And somewhere I think SLN has a role to play, because it has helped in putting the researchers, the resources well in place. So I think that is one very critical thing which has happened. The second thing I want to say is that early on when I kind of started this journey, participation was as an important part of conservation was something that was generally acknowledged by experts and researchers, but not so much by the governments. Yeah, and but I think what is quite satisfying now is that most governments now believe that participation is the way to go for snow leopard conservation. And part of the reason for that is a clear acknowledgement that snow leopard is not restricted to protected areas. So you need to look at conservation. So it is like almost forcefully you have to look at conservation across large landscapes. And this is something which has been accepted by various governments. And GSLEP, the conservation area program in Nepal, I think that was among the earliest ones that started looking at landscapes, snow leopard conservation or high altitude conservation across large landscapes. The project Snow Leopard in India, many such programs have actually come up in the last 10-15 years, I think, which has given a much better framework for landscape level participatory conservation, but not just that, but country level resources and international resources to actually implement them. So I think that is something which I feel was very satisfying development in this past, especially these last 20 years of SLN. And again, to just reiterate that SLN, tangibly and intangibly has had a role in many of these progresses that we have seen. And GSLEP again is something which I like to just mention here, that many of us, I think, have been a part of GSLEP at different levels, within the country to make the NSLEP or related work, and also at the international level at these various fora and the symposia, the meetings, the summits that we have had for GSLEP. GSLEP, I think, provides kind of a framework. Yeah, it is something where there is a lot of buy-in from the government, and it has a structure, it has a secretariat, and SLN has a huge mass of expertise. And there is still a lot of unfinished tasks. Like Ali mentioned that, they have already completed 2 landscape level management plans. There is one completed in Kyrgyzstan, Nepal has done, but many countries it is still remaining. And in many other countries where plans have been made, the implementation is still pending. So there is a way in which I think the expertise that we have, 500 plus members, donors, and this larger interest has to be garnered towards taking towards actual implementation of landscape level participatory conservation across these GSLEP landscapes in particular. So I think that is the long answer that I would like to give.
No, thanks, Yashvir. No, it's good to get it all in because you have a growth of knowledge. So thanks for being here and sharing it with us. And Ali, do you agree then in terms of the underlying changes at play in this early period that have also shaped snow leopard conservation? Do you agree that this need for a landscape approach have been key, or have there been other underlying changes that have been important, wider than SLN?
I believe this landscape consideration, which was somehow highlighted in the Snow Leopard Survival Strategy as well, but it surfaced more into implementation at the time of GSLAP. This is very relevant for a species like snow leopard, and it will remain relevant in coming decades as well. The reason, there are 2 reasons linked to it, I believe, fundamentally. One is, of course, the roaming range of the species. It is huge. We cannot confine it to a smaller area. We have a very famous, national park, Chitralgarh National Park in Pakistan. It was one of the, motivation for notifying that area has been, apart from Markhor, it has been the snow leopards. But the area is about 25 square kilometers. And when snow leopard was collared in Chitral, they found it traveled 1,600 square kilometers. So that changed the whole, conservation philosophy for managing protected areas. So one important thing is we need to think about the landscape rather than very limited protected areas. And second important is within these landscapes, we need to look into multiple strategies. One very stringent approach of excluding the people and strictly protecting a piece of land may not work, because communities are dependent on those areas. They have been there for not only hundreds but thousands of the years. So our management approach need to be flexible, so that again we come to the point that we need a uniform management strategy which accommodates the local heterogeneity with respect to the ecology as well as the social systems and the resource use pattern in those areas. So that it is the way. So creating limited areas where we will just call it a snow leopard area, that may not work in the future. Rather, we need to create a scenario where people and snow leopard, they coexist over a larger landscape, rather than trying to confine people in one pocket and snow leopard into the other pocket. So this I believe this landscape approach is very relevant today, and it will remain relevant. And even if it will become, I think, more important in coming years as things, the habitats is getting changed.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, so this landscape approach also in disciplines have evolved too, and physical landscape. Thanks. And I want to just now go straight to Lingyun, because Lingyun has also been involved in China's Snow Leopard Network, which is arguably a huge area of also bringing in many NGOs and researchers together. So I want to ask, how do you feel that China's Snow Leopard Network has supported snow leopard conservation in China? Lingyun, I don't know if you have some thoughts to share.
Yes, when I was just now talking about pulse effort across the world, I believe that in every country there are regional networks that are making huge efforts to contribute to this ambitious plan of pulse. So in China, we have established Snow Leopard China network since the year, quite recently. It's since the year 2017, when we have a Snow Leopard Forum on the Tibetan Plateau in Yushu city. And back then, we all agreed that we should have a network to exchange information and discuss our. We shared similar experiences and research interest, although across different mountain ranges in China, since it's huge. But still, this network is established for that reason back then. And then for those, the first several years, it's mostly we gather together every year to hold a Snow Leopard Forum in China, in different places, in different mountain ranges. I remember one in Xinjiang and several on the Tibetan Plateau. And then in the year 2018, we, the network of China, we decided to do something together. So that's why we have decided to jointly put our effort together to produce this Snow Leopard China report in that year. So that's why we try to gather information from all the institutes and the individuals who are doing conservation and the survey of snow leopard to see that how much effort how much achievement has been done. And we found that it's actually, although we feel that we have made a lot of effort in surveying, and a lot of us have been hiking in the mountains for years, still we only covered the abundance estimate in about 1.7% of snow leopard range in China. So this is also something we realized that there's a huge gap in China. We need to fill in if we want to finish the if we want to get a rigorous estimate of population status of snow leopard. I think now everybody in different institutes who are working on snow leopard, they are align their priorities, working priorities on pulse to first of all, maybe have a distribution map in different provinces, a more precise distribution map in different provinces. I know Xinjiang has the plan this year to summarize the previous work to make a better distribution map. And also in different regions, like in Sanjiangyuan region of Qinghai province, we are trying to put all the previous effort together to have a rigorous abundance estimate. And the lucky thing is that we found the previous effort has already been enough, should be enough to do some data analysis and have it is already seems like a balanced design, so we could have some robust estimate of the snow leopard there across a huge area, about I think it's about 360,000 square kilometers. So I think for such a huge country in China, the network is really important to bring together everyone's effort, but also there are quite a lot of obstacles and things we need to do in the future, especially how to motivate the government and different agencies to support us. Yes, so that's what we feel from China.
Thanks, Lingyun. Yeah, so I think you're highlighting how we're still very much working on that range map. And I see that Bilal, we're having a few questions coming in, and Bilal Mustafa is highlighting how it was very interesting to see how the range map evolved over time. And he's just commenting that it is a good strategy to develop an overall map of snow leopards by just the basis of knowledge of some experts without going through the literature and archives of the range. I think, though, I'll let Yashfir comment on this, but I think they did go use archives of the range. It was expert knowledge based on literature. Is that right, Yashfir?
Yes, Justine. So I just had responded on the text chat also. So you're right that, I basically skipped that the details which are there in the chapter 3 of the Snow Leopard book. So it was an initial exercise, and like I mentioned, that this is a time when there are very, very few global level outputs available. And at the actual Snow Leopard surveys had been done in a very, very small portion of the area. But the experts, so to say, had knowledge of the larger area because they had worked on other taxa. So they had brought in all this information, and literature also, of course, they consulted in the process of actually pinpointing. So it was a long drawn process where the experts collected information, pointed them on physical maps, and then after a year or so, when they actually met in Beijing, that is where all these were compiled. So it was for that time, it was among the best outputs. Of course, it has been modified and improved much more since then. Yeah.
Thanks, Yashfir, for clarifying. And I just will clarify also about the steering committee. So it's actually elected members every 3 years. Members are elected to join the steering committee. So you can definitely nominate other SLN members to become part of that steering committee. And then there's a vote every 3 years. So, we really encourage people to nominate people from the range countries or, and then I'm just going to go, I have just a message from Sandro. He had to leave, but he just also wanted to highlight it's 20 years since he started working with snow leopards. So it's also his 20-year anniversary. So if you see Sandro, please wish him his warm regards and happy 20 years. We have, okay, and then we have another question about trophy hunting. I might give this to you, Ali. I see that David Mallon has already started to respond, but there's a question by Olivia on trophy hunting, and she asks if someone can expand on this. And where is the snow leopard population at in our local context to know if trophy hunting is going to be helpful or problematic for conservation of snow leopards? I don't know, Ali, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I think there is a bit confusion here. Let me first clarify. When we are talking about trophy hunting, we are talking about the prey species, not the snow leopards. Snow leopard population is still very small, and even in Pakistan, when we have now assessed with the latest science, we found that population is even smaller than what we thought. And second important element is the reproductive parameters, and the life states of snow leopard does not allow for this kind of venture. So essentially, SLN has been opposing any idea of trophy hunting related to the snow leopard itself. But of course, trophy hunting of the prey species, it has been tested in different parts of the world, particularly in Pakistan. And it has been, there is a chapter on it in the Snow Leopard book as well, where one can see the details. And what we found is it has been very helpful on two fronts. One, it has a very clear positive effect on the population recovery of the prey species. Secondly, it also helped build a positive attitude in the communities towards conservation overall. So in that way, one, the availability of the prey is there, you can expect a better chances for snow leopard to survive. And when community is willing to talk about conservation, you get opportunity to talk about the snow leopard conservation as well. So one thing still which is relatively, you know, missing or poorly addressed in snow leopard conservation in this trophy hunting program is some of the communities, they think maybe the animals which are being hunted for the trophy purpose, they may be only concerned about that. And but through the conservation agreements and through education, government as well as the conservation organization like ours, we have been trying to educate them. We need to think about the overall ecosystem. So it is not just the mountain ungulates we need to worry about, but the wolf and snow leopard and other large predators, they're equally important. And in any area where we are exercising trophy hunting program and community is getting substantial benefit in terms of the local economy, then we need to protect and preserve the whole functional ecosystem consisting both the snow leopard and the prey species. So overall, I believe there is clear evidence that trophy hunting of the prey species is a positive initiative for sustaining the ecosystem and for establishing the snow leopard population.
Thank you, Ali, for that very in-depth response and clarifying it. I'm mindful of time. We're almost running out, but just before, I would like to ask everyone a final question, because Tom reminded us that SLN really acts as a platform to bring stakeholders together. And over time, as you've all shared really well, this has changed, but SLN has done this really well, but it will keep changing. So what does the future hold? So I might go over to Kostub first, since he's been very closely involved with GSLEP, and you all discussed about the importance of GSLEP. So how can SLN support GSLEP further? And how can, it become more of a catalyst to keep growing together so that we can support researchers, conservationists, but also governments for snow leopards? Kostub, over to you.
No, thank you for that question. I think the way we look at these two networks or these two platforms, the Snow Leopard Network is more of field practitioners, a network of field practitioners, on-ground conservationists, experts, researchers, people who are spending the time and effort out in the field, generating knowledge, generating experiences. The GSLEP program, in other words, is something that helps scale up what's being generated by this fabulous network of experts on the ground. So I think there've been times people have asked either or, and it's actually not either or, but this and that. The role the Snow Leopard Network plays at this point in time is to generate that knowledge, and that knowledge is then transformed into policies or is scaled into to levels which none of the organizations or individuals, I think, even if we all come together, will be able to translate. Just to give this very simple example, UNICEF is one of the biggest organizations working on children, and their entire budget is smaller than the annual budget of one province, and a small province in one of the range countries. So it's that level of scales that we're talking about, where the governments have the ability, mandate, and the wherewithal to scale up these actions. So I think the future would be to continue engaging more, like we've done in the last 3 years, ever since Justine took over as the ED of the Snow Leopard Network, really emphasizing on training, capacity building, networking, expanding the knowledge base, and then taking that knowledge to the policymakers to scale it up, to scale it to a level where it can be transformed into policy, and replicated at the level which I think none of us will be able to do individually. So that's what I feel that the network should continue to keep doing this fabulous job of creating knowledge, which is the main product that we are out here with, and then keep providing it to be scaled up. My 2 cents.
Thanks, Kustub. And Ling Yun, you are on the current steering committee right now. So what would you like to see from your members? Many members are here today. Is there something you would like to see from them? I mean, they expect a lot from you, and you're delivering. You've helped develop this journal and many other more interaction across members. But what would you like to see from them?
Well, I would like to see more maybe exchange opportunities, especially during this COVID pandemic period. I have the feeling that even inside China, the information exchange between SLN members has been stopped for years. So that's why this SLN platform will become quite important, as we have all of the training and webinars going on that keeps everybody involved. Not everybody, but at least part of us involved in different sections. So yes, so that's what I hope to see, that exchange of information, and also I hope that we could have the opportunity to do something together in the future if there's another chance. Not only inside China, but also maybe POS could be one of the opportunities, but also the other events that we could together produce something together.
Thank you, Ling Yun. So before we end, any final thoughts from Ali, Yashvir, Kustub, or Ling Yun? Any final thoughts? I think, yes, Yashvir, I was going to say, you have to, since you're one of the members from that very first meeting also in Seattle, I believe you were on that photo. So any last thoughts as we go into the next 20 years?
I mean, again, there could be a lot of things which can be done, but I just want to take off from what Kustub mentioned, that this network is the knowledge base, which is very, very crucial. And GSLEP is providing some kind of structure, funding, buy-in from governments and people who really matter, both in the agencies that have the money and the governments, of course, who can work at scale. So a lot of members that may do research at smaller scales, might do conservation programs at smaller scales, but upscaling is something that the GSLEP can, I mean, that is one of the important mechanisms to enable that. So I think this is one aspect. The second thing is that having participated in some of the Snow Leopard symposia, which have unfortunately stopped, so we used to have Snow Leopard symposia, at a time when there were a handful of experts, 20, 30, 40. Now we have 500 plus. The network does provide a kind of forum for interaction, but I think, post-COVID especially, and they are very expensive. There is no doubt about it. But now we have the option of hybrid mode conferences and so on. So I would really like to suggest to the SLN network, the current steering committee and you all, to see if regional symposia can be started, and maybe something like a global symposia, so this will allow, what the symposiums do is not just the papers, but the networking. Actually, when you actually meet a person in flesh and blood, it just makes a huge amount of difference. Yeah, so I think this is something that you can think of. I think it will add value, and it has a lot of benefits for both science and conservation, is what I feel. Because GSLEP meetings do happen periodically, but by nature of the way that GSLEP meetings are, only a handful of people can participate. Essentially, those associated with the government and maybe some of the key non-governmental organizations or multilateral agencies. So the symposia is where the larger membership can get a forum to interact. So maybe you can just consider this. Thank you.
Yes, we'll definitely take that on board, Yashvir. And we can, of course, combine it with the GSLEP meeting on the sidelines, for example, to benefit also from that meeting. Ali, do you have something to add?
Yeah, first thing, I fully agree with Yashvir. Of course, these GSLAB steering committee meetings, these are filling the gap to a certain extent that people related to snow leopard conservation, they come together and we meet during these steering committee meetings. But still, I think the participation is very limited. So having an idea of a snow leopard conference or symposium where you can have, more people who may not be essentially linked to the GSLAB or not linked to the government or something that may be a good idea, at least having once in a 5 year or 3 year or something like that is a possible. I see a need for it, and that also will promote more collaboration. When you meet in person, you develop friendships, and that go long way, and you develop more collaboration and more good work among the countries in the coming years. And it also provides training and mentoring to the young snow leopard scientists and whatever. So, I in that way fully agree with Jaspreet. And other thing I would like to highlight is this training program of SLN. I'm very much impressed with that. It has been very effective, particularly during the COVID time. But, the online things, they have certain edge towards it. There are certain benefits, but at the same time, there are certain limitation to the online training program. So I believe we may look into some funding opportunity, and we may host some of these very important trainings in person and rotate them different countries where we can bring people together and have these trainings, which, all the themes you have covered, those are relevant, but particularly related to the past. This is something very important. We need to have in-person trainings, and ecosystem evaluation is something very important. We need to think about having and replicating that process in different countries. There's tourism management and conservation, approaches and planning these things. So these are very important things. And if we can, plan even one or two actually on-ground trainings, and we define a kind of a hubs in a region where there may be some neighboring countries where these visas are less problematic, they may group together and have those meetings. That is going to be very useful, I believe.
Yeah, very much agree with you. We've had a lot of interest for trainings and exchange. So hopefully we can do these in person. There's a lot of work for you, Ling Yun, and also Belinda. I see she's in the audience, part of our steering committee. A lot of work for you guys ahead in this next part of your term. But no, these are really important points, and hopefully we can leverage funds and perhaps collaborate with GSLEP, because through they also have a capacity mandate to make those happen. So thank you all. Thank you and everyone for joining today and making this event more than just an anniversary. I mean, I was particularly struck how SLN has really evolved over time, and it keeps evolving. So it will be really interesting to see what happens in the next 20 years as we manage to stay local through our membership, but stay also global through our exchanges. So thank you all for taking the time. I know all of our panelists spent a lot of time researching, going back to old documents, because not everything was digital at the time. and looking through what had been done. So we really appreciate you taking the time. And also we went over time today online live. So thank you to all the participants and everyone for taking the time to go back in history with SLN. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you to those in the back end, of course, as always. Raki has been with us for many steering committee terms. So thank you, Raki, for being that rock and keeping it all moving forward.
Thank you to our wonderfully interactive members as well. Thank you all for being with us. Good
Great,
day to
let's
you all.
keep in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.